A broken veteran inherits a rundown junkyard and an old dog, until the dog uncovers a $200 million secret buried under the rust. What happens next will blow your mind. This isn't just an inheritance. It's a life-changing discovery that no one saw coming. Mark had spent most of his life serving his country, always on the move, always putting duty before himself. The war had taken its toll, and now, returning home, Mark felt like a stranger in his own life. He had spent years battling on the front lines. But now the fight felt different, one he wasn't prepared for. His friends had moved on, and the world had changed while he was gone. He had no job, no real purpose, and no family left to turn to. The closest family he had was his uncle, but even that connection had faded over the years. The old man had been a recluse, living far away in a town Mark had never even visited. When the letter arrived one rainy afternoon, Mark thought it was just another formality. But the words on the paper were clear. His uncle had passed away, and everything he owned, including a rundown gas station and an old dog named Gus, had been left to him. Mark stared at the letter, feeling a mix of disbelief and frustration. A junkyard in the middle of nowhere? An old dog? It seemed like nothing more than a cruel joke. But there was no turning back. He had to go. The drive out to the station felt endless. Mark's old truck rattled as it bumped along the dirt road, the sky stretching endlessly before him. He couldn't help but feel a sinking pit in his stomach. This wasn't what he had imagined when he thought of returning home. The land stretched out in every direction, barren and unwelcoming, like the world had forgotten about this place long ago. The station itself was an eyesore, cracked windows, peeling paint, and weeds crawling up the walls. It looked more like a ghost town than a place anyone would want to visit. Mark parked in front of the station and stared at it for a long moment, taking in the decay. The gas pumps were rusted and useless, the sign half fallen, and the parking lot filled with broken-down vehicles. There was no sign of life, no sense of purpose. How could his uncle have lived here? What had brought him to this abandoned corner of the world? As Mark stepped out of the truck, the overwhelming silence weighed on him. This place had been forgotten, and so had its people. But then, his attention shifted. He noticed a figure sitting by the door of the station, a dog. Old, scruffy, and weathered, the dog was tied to a post. His fur was matted, his eyes dull with age. It was clear he'd seen better days. Mark wasn't sure what to make of him, but the dog's presence was somehow comforting that as he approached, the dog lifted his head and met Mark's gaze, a silent recognition in the air. Gus, the dog he had inherited along with this place, didn't look like much, but Mark felt a strange sense of connection. Maybe he wasn't so alone after all. The first few days passed in a blur of work, and through it all, Gus kept him company, wandering around the station like he had been doing for years. At first, Mark barely paid attention to the dog, his mind preoccupied with the mess around him. But one afternoon, as Mark was sorting through a pile of old tires, he noticed Gus acting strangely. The dog was pacing back and forth, his nose sniffing the ground urgently. He would stop and stare at a certain spot near one of the old cars, his ears pinned back, and a low growl rumbled in his throat. Curious, Mark walked over, brushing his hands off on his jeans. "What is it, Gus?" he muttered, kneeling down beside the dog. Gus immediately stopped growling and looked up at Mark, as if urging him to investigate. Mark followed Gus's gaze and noticed something odd. Dirt and debris had been disturbed beneath the car, like someone had been digging there recently. Mark's curiosity peaked. He cleared the dirt away with his hands, pulling away broken branches and trash. As his fingers scraped the earth, he felt something hard and cold. Metal. After a moment of effort, Mark uncovered a rusty latch. His heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just a random pile of junk. There was something hidden here. He tugged on the latch, revealing a small compartment beneath the car. Inside was a dusty, old briefcase. Mark's breath caught in his throat as he carefully pulled it out, his hands shaking with anticipation. This wasn't just some forgotten item. The briefcase was significant. But what could it hold? Mark opened the case, revealing a collection of worn documents, old blueprints, and several legal papers. He picked up the first one, squinting to read the faded text. What he saw made his blood run cold. These weren't just papers. These were the keys to a fortune. Maps, coordinates, and a bank account number that pointed to something far bigger than he ever imagined. His uncle hadn't just left him a rundown station and an old dog. He had left him a $200 million secret, one that was now in Mark's hands. The once quiet town was suddenly filled with chatter. The old station, which had been nothing more than a forgotten relic of the past, was now the focal point of attention. The townspeople, who had long since stopped thinking of the place as anything more than an eyesore, started showing up in droves, eager to see it for themselves. Some were there out of genuine interest, others out of suspicion. Everyone wanted to know if the rumors were true, that Mark, the broken veteran, had stumbled upon a $200 million fortune at IT first. Mark didn't know how to handle it. He had never been the center of attention, and now, suddenly, people were treating him like a celebrity. Locals who had barely acknowledged his existence before were offering congratulations, wanting to shake his hand, or even bringing over gifts of food and drink. But it wasn't just praise Mark received. There were those who began eyeing the station, offering to buy it from him, promising him a life of comfort in exchange for his newfound wealth. But amidst the excitement came a more sinister tone. Some of the more hardened residents, those who had known his uncle's shady past, grew wary. They began to question how Mark could have inherited such a fortune. How had his uncle managed to hide so much money in a rundown station? What was really going on? As the offers and questions came pouring in, Mark felt the weight of the discovery press on his shoulders. The money was real, but so was the danger that now surrounded him. The town's reaction wasn't just about curiosity. It was about a gold mine that some would stop at nothing to get their hands on. What had seemed like a gift was quickly becoming a burden. The taller one, who had an air of confidence about him, made the first move. "You must be Mark," he said, offering a handshake that felt more like an inspection. "We've heard about your discovery." Mark's pulse quickened. He wiped his hands on his jeans and shook the man's hand. "What do you want?" His voice was steady, though his mind raced. These men weren't here for small talk. The shorter man, with cold eyes that seemed to pierce right through Mark, looked over the station with disinterest. "We've come to make you an offer," the tall man continued. "A very generous one. You don't need to be dealing with this place. We'll take it off your hands. Cash, no questions asked." Mark narrowed his eyes. He'd been getting offers from locals, but this was different. These men weren't asking for the station. They were demanding it. And the way they spoke, like the land was already theirs, made Mark uneasy. "I'm not selling," he said, firmly, trying to maintain his calm. The taller man smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "You're not in a position to refuse," he said, his voice lowering. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Before Mark could respond, Gus, who had been lying near the door, sprang to his feet. The old dog's hackles raised, and a low growl rumbled in his throat. Mark's heart skipped. Gus had never reacted like this before. The dog was now standing protectively between Mark and the men, his teeth bared in warning. The taller man took a step back, startled by Gus's sudden aggression. "That dog's not worth much," he muttered, but his unease was clear. "You might want to control him." Mark stood his ground, but the tension in the air was thick. "I'm not selling anything to you. You should leave." Mark began working with the local authorities, sharing the information he had found in the briefcase. The more they uncovered about his uncle's dealings, the clearer it became that the fortune had ties to a larger criminal syndicate. The documents Mark had discovered weren't just blueprints. They were pieces to a puzzle that connected his uncle's past to an illicit operation that had been running under the radar for years. With the authorities' help, Mark exposed the network and brought the criminals to justice, dismantling the operation piece by piece. It wasn't easy, and the threats didn't stop, but with Gus by his side, Mark felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. The dog had led him to more than just money. It had led him to his uncle's redemption and, ultimately, his own.